Hi, my name is Samuel Duncan, and this is my presentation on the Kamakura Shogunate of Japan and the resistance that shaped a nation. The key question that I will be looking to answer today is how did the Kamakura Shogunate's military and governmental structure contribute to Japan's successful resistance against the Mongol invasion? I will answer this question a little later, but this is just the first initial look at it. The first thing that I would like to hit on is the governmental structure of Japan at this time. The Kamakura Shogunate was Japan's first military government, and it was ruled by the Minamoto clan. At the time of the Mongol invasions, the Hojo clan ruled as shiken, as regions for the Kamakura shoguns. Unlike a fragmented feudal system that we were used to seeing at the time, especially in Europe, the Hojo regions had centralized control over Japan's military resources, which is important to note because prior to this, it was pretty decentralized. It's really when the Hojo take over that they centralize a lot of this power. Samurai and local lords, the daimyo, were required to fight when called upon, creating an organized military system. The stability of the shogunate at this time prevented internal conflicts that could have weakened Japan's overall defense of their nation. We move on and we hit on the history of the samurai. Their early roots come from the Heian period, the 794 to 1185 AD. Samurai began as provincial warriors serving aristocrat families, protecting land as the imperial court's control weakened this imperial court prior to the Kamakura Shogunate. They come to power after the Genpei War, this warring factions thing in Japan. The Minamoto clan win it. They establish the Kamakura Shogunate. They make these samurais the ruling military class with land and feudal obligations. Feudal obligations, as in they serve these daimyo and they serve under these regions. Samurai followed a code of loyalty, discipline, and honor. This bushido. They specialized in swordsmanship, archery, and mounted combat, but initially fought through personal duels rather than large-scale strategies. This comes to take a turn in mentality when the Mongols invade because it forces the samurai to shift from individual combat to coordinated warfare, making them more effective against large invading forces such as the Mongols. The second point I would like to hit on is that they are a unified front. Unlike the Mongol Empire, which relied on vassal states, Japan's centralized military ensured unity and defense. The Mongol forces include Chinese, Korean, and Mongol troops, many of whom were reluctant conscripts and lacked coordination. The Japanese fought with a strong sense of national pride and cultural identity, on the other hand, boosting their own morale. Unlike in other periods of Japanese history, as I pointed out earlier, the Kamakura Shogunate maintained relative internal stability before and during the invasions. I say before and during because, as we hit on in the aftermath, this doesn't last long after this invasion, but we'll touch on that a little later. This unity prevented internal revolts during wartime, unlike in later periods that ended up weakening Japan down the road. The third thing I would like to hit on is the role of natural factors, the kamikaze, this divine wind as it's referred to by the Japanese, and its impact. This typhoon, they released typhoons in 1274 and 1281 that destroyed large portions of the Mongol fleets. The second invasion in 1281 was the largest with 140,000 Mongol troops. That is the natural factors. The response to those natural factors was there these raids that weakened the Mongols before the storm arrived. I guess this is not reaction, but preparation for it. The shogunate's defensive walls and strategic planning prevented the Mongols from quickly landing on Japanese soil. The Mongols were forced to stay on their ships for weeks, even months, due to the fortified coastline, making them vulnerable when these storms hit. And this leads directly into the counter argument that I hope to address today. Were the typhoons a true reason for Japan's survival? Some historians argue that without the typhoons, Japan would have fallen because the Mongols had a numerical advantage, especially in 1281. The Mongols had advanced weaponry that utilized gunpowder from the Chinese, and Japan lacked a naval force to defeat the Mongol fleet at sea. My answer to this is that the Mongols were already in a precarious spot prior to this. It's convenient to point out these typhoons as these Hail Mary of God, this kind of luck of the Irish type thing. That the facts of it are that they did a really good job at destroying the Mongol fleet. But my answer to it is that Japan's strategic defenses and military organization prevented the Mongols from gaining control of key territories even prior to when the typhoons roll in. The Mongols also struggled with coordination. They had multiple fleets of their ships out in the water at this time, and they never centralized them on any key points that the Japanese that would have resulted in them a swift victory by the Mongols. And the Japanese fortified these places, and then when they tried to hit them, they ran into bad luck when these storms rolled in. They ran into supply shortages, and Japan wasn't just sitting ducks. It was a mainly defensive war. They had relentless counterattacks on the water, even if they lacked a naval force that could have properly defended them at sea. Even if the storms had not occurred, I strongly believe that the Mongol forces were already in a too weakened of a spot, too weakened of a position, and would have faced just great difficulty in sustaining their invasion against the Japanese, regardless of these typhoons. It's a convenient thing to say. I just feel like it does a disservice to the facts and the history of these warriors. It was really interesting doing all this research, and I feel like that answers my key question. There's a lot of things that go into it. There's a lot of factors. I do believe that the government and the military and how they had that structured played a great role in this conflict. I can't blame the Japanese for being like nationalistic pride. We are all this, because they are, from research, they are what it is as advertised. It's just that they also have these two big storms come in, which I can't say they weren't knowledgeable of. They probably took it to their advantage, but I don't know what you want them to do in a war like this, a conflict like this. The aftermath of these conflicts is the cost of defending Japan drained its resources. And since there were no new lands to reward samurai with, due to this being more of a defensive war, many warriors became discontent. This weakened the shogunate's ability to maintain loyalty and control over its people. The failure to properly reward samurai for their service led to resentment and uprisings. This instability contributed to the fall of the Kamakura Shogunate in 1333, paving the way for this other shogunate that comes along the road, known as the Ashikaga. They're not really relevant to the story that much. My final point that I have is that it may not have lasted until the modern day, but this period of time shaped all of what Japan is today. Their resilience, their nationalistic pride, even factors of their government and their military, I wouldn't say are still the same, but they have taken great influence from this exact period of time, these exact conflicts. And it was a real treat to do research and do this presentation of it, just from a military point of view. It was really great. But thank you for listening to this presentation. I want to drag it overboard. Thank you, and God bless.